All right, today we have Dr. Monica Cox with us, and I'm super excited because she is someone in my discipline in engineering education. Dr. Cox was born in Shorterville, Georgia, and basically grew up in Newville, Alabama. She says she's from all the Villes, though, in that general area. Currently, she's a distinguished full professor of engineering at The Ohio State University. And she is also the CEO of a company called Steminent, which we will talk about soon. She has a BS in mathematics from Spelman College, a master's in industrial engineering from the University of Alabama, and a PhD in leadership and policy studies from Vanderbilt University. She's had lots of roles in her very distinguished career. She served as inaugural department chair in engineering education at Ohio State. She's gone from assistant to associate professor at Purdue University, where she was the first African American woman to earn tenure in the College of Engineering at Purdue. She is a 2020 fellow of the American Society for Engineering Education, our professional organization for engineering education. She once served as the director for the state of Indiana's Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation, and she was the inaugural director of the Engineering Leadership Minor at Purdue. She has done so many things in our field, including focusing on research that infuses equity in STEM education, and she explores the experiences of women of color in the workplace. She's led many multidisciplinary projects and collaborated on those with funding upwards of $20 million. And she's also authored over 130 scholarly publications. If that wasn't enough to tell you who this incredible woman is, she also has a ridiculous following on social media. So if you ever want to see what it looks like to become famous on the internet, as an engineer, Dr. Cox is the person to find and follow. Kyla and I personally enjoy all of the shenanigans that go on.
Definitely.
And her brand is really like her. It's not anything else. She has some sayings, especially "Stop Playing Diversity," which is one of my favorite.
You can get a mug.
You can get a mug, a t-shirt, several other things
Yep.
to remind people stop playing with you. And she is just someone who lives authentically online and in person. So this is who she is for real. We actually met her, well, I should say Kyla met her because I met her years prior, but we interviewed her previously on the Engineering Change podcast. So Yvette Pearson is the host of that, and she invited us to do like a collaboration with her. And so Kyla got to connect with Monica like virtually that way. But I met her actually at an ASEE conference where I was introduced to her, and I had a full fangirl moment in front of her. I don't know if she remembers that, but she was so kind to me in spite of my ridiculousness. She has a lot of hobbies. She likes to read. She motivates people. She inspires so many, even though she doesn't really know it. And she's got a lot of side hustles, and we'll encourage you to get some too. So that's Dr. Monica Cox. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that great introduction. Man, I'm a little embarrassed, but yes,
Why?
believe it because there is even a story where you talked about the social media part. I didn't really believe that, but I've only traveled maybe 3 times this year. Really, in the pandemic, I've only traveled 3 times. And every time I go somewhere, if I'm introduced, someone's like, I follow you on Twitter, and they want to take a selfie. And it does happen all the time. And I was just in a professional meeting introducing myself, and a woman started shaking this table, and somebody was like, what's wrong with you? And they're like, that's Dr. Monica. And it was just weird. Like, I bought some mugs and I did this and I did that. And so I don't realize the impact because I'm just out there sharing and doing what I do. So thank you so much
You're
for
just living your
acknowledging.
life, and it's
I'm
fabulous.
telling you.
Yeah.
Authentically. Like, I think the word authentic is the important part there.
So we're really gonna try to dig into how you came to be your authentic self in a space that's typically not something that you see from black female engineers or black engineers or people in general, right? I think
Yeah.
that's probably going to be the theme throughout this, but we really want to know like what it was like growing up in, where is it, Newville, Alabama.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? It was good. It was Southeast, and it was kind of stereotypical. So when you think about the Confederate flags and all that, yeah, I pretty much grew up there, home of the Confederacy. Took the field trips to the Confederate prisons, like just weird stuff. Jefferson
What?
Davis. Yes, that was our fourth grade field trip because my principal loved the Civil War. And so all the fourth graders had to go to Andersonville. And that was our field trip. So we learned about the Confederacy. And I was thinking about this too. Like we watched North and South. I don't know if you know about that, but like the mini
No.
series, we watched North and South. They were about that life. Like I grew up when people were honoring the Confederacy. And I would say, I remember being in an auditorium, and one of my moments, you talk about authenticity. Everybody was just glorifying stuff. And I raised my hand and I said, I'm really glad that the South didn't win because I didn't want to be a slave. I
Hello.
just, as a fourth grader, like that was the conversation that we
Wow.
had of how I was not going to be enslaved. And I don't know why people wanted to glorify that life.
Yeah.
So
Did what
that's
was the
me.
response to that? Did they?
My sister just looked at me kind of crazy. But what I loved about the environment is that I was still allowed to say that. So many
Mm-hmm.
people think that you can't speak that, but I argued with
Mm,
my classmates. I wore political shirts in high school. I did all of those things that really went against oppression, but we just all agreed to disagree. And it was just a very different culture. And because
Mm-hmm.
I was brought up in a school system that was K through 12, these were the same people I went to kindergarten with, and I graduated with them. But I ended up
mm,
being SGA president. I ended up being elected to stuff, although I was the only Black person in my classes, just
wow.
because people saw who people were, like their characters. I had good character. We were a community, and it wasn't as black or white as you would think it would be because we just looked out for each other. And in a way, I wish that our society was like that, where people can have their Confederate flag. I could wear my Malcolm X shirt or whatever, but we come together as humans and we just understand that and at the end of the day, we are a part of a common community. So that's what I learned. And I feel like that's how I can get along with almost anyone because at the end of the day, we can find a way to connect if we really look hard enough.
So did you take any?
So
Oh,
you've been outspoken a long time. Oh, sorry, you've been outspoken a very long time. I'm hearing.
My entire life. And it was encouraged. My parents encouraged me to be that way, to think and to be bold and to question. That's all I know.
yeah. I know your parents were like a huge influence on your life. And so growing up, were
Yeah.
they like the people who kind of pushed you in terms of like your interest in school to pursue like a STEM related discipline?
A little bit. So my father was about 43 or 44 when I was born. So he was in the military in the 1950s. He traveled around the world and he was exposed. He was a guy from the backwoods of Alabama, but he knew that there was more out there. And I feel that that always informed my life. My parents were school teachers, so they were really connected to the community. They taught during segregation. And I often tell people a little bit of history. My mom's, no, the school where my parents went to school was built by Rosa Parks' father. So
Wow.
to kind of see that,
Interesting.
that
Wow.
history. Yeah. And my father also went to school at Alabama State in the 1950s during the Montgomery Civil Rights
Wow.
Movement. And one
Wow.
thing that I often tell people is that he would tell me the story about, like, I remember asking him, like, how did people just not walk? I mean, how did they not take the bus? Like,
Mm-hmm.
Montgomery was big.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you just did it. He said, people gave rides to each other. and there were bombings all the time beyond what you saw. Like they would go to the cafeteria on Sundays, and somebody would say like, this church was bombed today, and it was
Mm-hmm.
just a way of life. And like the last thing that I know is that, he also said the governor had a mandate, and he said any professor at Alabama State who participated in the bus boycott would be fired, and any student would be expelled. So he was dictating, really similar to what we see today, trying to dictate people's rights and saying that he would take away their educations and their livelihoods personally from the governor's mansion down the street at Alabama State University and HBCU. And I
Wow.
say that because that's who raised
Mm-hmm.
me. My father saw all this, and he was a very gentle man, um, very quiet, but he told me to believe in my rights. He told me to speak up. And I never knew what he was doing until I was older, and I realized, oh, everybody doesn't feel free to speak like this. Everyone isn't confident in their rights. Everyone doesn't understand that these are the freedoms that are afforded to them. So, yeah. And to answer your question, my father, this was in like the early 80s. He enrolled me in a computer class at a community
Oh wow.
college. And I have a picture somewhere where I was there. Maybe how old was I then? I had to be like 6 or 7, and they had like the big desktops, the big computers, and he just always put me in classes like that, typing, computer, whatever was there. He just exposed me to it. He was not a STEM person. He was a medic in the army, but if there was anything connected to science, computers, he did it.
That's super
That
cool.
was it. That was my exposure.
That is very cool.
Yeah.
So somehow through your exposure, with the classes, like was there anything specifically like in your high school that helped to further like put you in that direction? Because somehow you ended up at Spelman to study math. So was this something like that? Like, was there anything that steered you in that
Her face
direction?
is
Because I
so
doubt
funny.
that the counselors at your school knew anything about a Spelman.
Right.
No, it's a very interesting story in that, once again, my dad just took me to a lot of camps, like engineering camps. And I just started applying to engineering because I realized that I could get scholarships.
Yeah.
And I was
Mm-hmm.
bright, the valedictorian in my class. So I applied to 3 universities: Florida A&M, Tuskegee, and Spelman, and I got full rides to all of them. And I did not even visit Spelman before I went. I just knew I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to go. I received a call from Dr. Etta Faulkner, who was over the scholarship, the Women in Science and Engineering program through NASA. And she said, "You have a full scholarship. You've been selected by what is it, Kennedy Space Center, and also Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama, and you could go and intern there in the summer." And at first I was like, oh, well, this is just like tuition. And she said, no, it's a full ride and you get to work there in the summer. So I said, I'm going to Spelman and be a part of the program. And that was it. So that was my path. Um, yeah,
So you worked
that was
at
it.
one of the space centers?
Yeah, Marshall Space Flight
Mm-hmm.
Center. I was there for 4 summers, and I was a gym fellow, so I was there as well, working with people who did ground payload operations for the International Space Station.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
It's
That's
pretty
amazing.
serious job, and the fact that
Yeah.
Spelman said, we're just not only going to pay for you, but we're also going to put you in this position, this very
Make
important
some
position
money.
every single summer and make some money and have this experience and this knowledge.
S-
Yep.
So
It
were
was
you
amazing.
also like a boss as an undergrad?
Boss. The personality was always there, but because I came from a rural environment, and so I had to study really hard. I was behind. I did not have AP classes. I didn't
Hmm.
have even calculus. So I was just a hard worker. And I went back to give a lecture. It was the Dr. Faulkner's memorial lecture. And one of my teachers said I was the one who would always cry. And she always told her math students about me and how I became a professor and I worked really hard. So they were just really proud of me. And I feel like I'm just a person who found the resources and I just did the work to be successful, and I don't take it for granted. So it was a blessing, a full circle moment
That's
for me.
beautiful.
Thank you.
And I like the fact that you could struggle at an HBCU in the beginning, because I feel like if it had been at a PWI, there might have been like imposter syndrome and all these other things to be like, oh, do I actually belong here? Versus I'm amongst my own people. I'm going to figure it out. Like you said, I'm going to get the resources, and, they invite you back to, to give a talk. So.
Absolutely. And you know what got me? It was just, I was just really disturbed that I could come from one place and my classmates came from other places, but they did so well. And this is a story too. I feel you. I tell you, I have so many stories.
We love
but
stories.
Yeah, that's why we're here. That's why we're here. We want to hear them all.
Yes, when I got to my summer science and engineering program, my roommate was from Houston. And we were talking about, like, what are our parents doing? Where are we from? And, I was like, oh, my parents are teachers. I'm from Alabama. And she said, my dad's an astronaut. And first of all, I didn't know. First, Black people, I knew there were some astronauts, but, I don't know Black astronauts.
I don't know none personally.
Yeah. And so her name is Kelly, and Kelly's dad was Charlie Bolden, who ended up being the NASA administrator. And at the time, I think he was commander for the Hubble Space Telescope mission. And so understand the bar, like coming from Alabama, like HBCU, my classmate, my roommate was STEM personified.
Right.
On another level. And dad doing a profession that the typical person can't do. So it was, and then I had other classmates whose parents were professors. One was a professor in North Carolina State. She's an electrical engineer. Another whose dad was like a business professor, I think at FAMU. And the other tidbit is that there were 13 of us who got the scholarship that year. 3 of us ended up being engineering professors. 3 of us got NSF Early Career Awards. 3 of us were Presidential Early Career Award winner. Wow. And so that was like one class, one cohort.
One cohort of people from one university.
All Black.
There needs to be like a longitudinal
college,
study on Spelman.
Just one college.
Right, from one college. That's true.
One college, one cohort, class of 94, 3 women, presidential award winners, engineering, when the numbers are so low in engineering. So those are my classmates. And
we've had a good number of people from Spelman on the podcast, and I'm like, there needs to be some kind of Spelman documentary for STEM, because
I agree. There's something about that upbringing, like they're our parents or something. But you know what I'm saying?
In a way they are, because you leave the nest, and that's your second set of parents once you left home.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think one thing I would want to leave with your listeners is that I used to talk about those 2 colleagues I had, because they were 4.0 students. I was maybe like cum laude, which is still great, but they were like the summa. And I just remembered years later just being like, you all were always so smart. You were the ones that went to Georgia Tech, got those 4.0s. And my friend said something so profound. She said, you're in the same place where we are. So it didn't matter that you started in this rural place. We all got to the White House.
Amen.
We all got we all got what we needed
thinking about this. Yeah. Like it's real. And that's part of why we are here, right? To be able to tell people, like, none of this really matters, right? Like, are you going to let a GPA define you? Are you going to let what your parents did or where you grew up define you? Or are you going to change whatever needs to be changed for you to reach the goals that you're trying to reach?
Absolutely.
Because it really is hard work, right? Like, that's it.
Yeah.
It is. It is. And one nugget that I had even when I was a professor, like people used to ask me this all the time, and these were um majority people who would kind of be like, well, given your story, like how did you end up where you are? Like people were truly, and I mean, people were truly fascinated, like, first Black woman to earn tenure at the College of Engineering. Like, what was it that got you to this place? How is your story this way? And I often tell people, I didn't think from a deficit perspective. My parents
Mm-hmm.
didn't raise me from a deficit perspective. So I never saw that I couldn't be president of the United States. I couldn't be inaugural department chair. Like nothing ever limited me. I I just didn't maybe know what it
Mm-hmm.
was, but I grew up, in my formative years, just believing that I deserve to be at the table. I deserve to be a leader if that's what I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be. Like there was never any barrier. And that is what you see. And it's so funny because you think about kids. Like I have a little kid, and I had that's another story too. Had a child in my early 40s, and to see the openness,
Mm-hmm.
the innocence of a child, we
Mm-hmm.
lose that as an adult. And so a lot of the authenticity that you see is my actually going back to my childhood and the core of who I am, and just making sure that when I'm engaging with people, it is that sincerity, it is that kindness, it is like what we are taught to be, the love that we are taught to have as children. That is what I want to display as an adult. And people think that it's so weird, but no, it's me just retaining the core and some of the purity that I just never wanted to lose.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
chose that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
someone asked me once, like, why do you like working with college students so much? And I'm like, well, they're at this wonderful age where they're just out of high school, they're adults, but the world has not beaten all of their hopes and dreams and ideas out of them. Like college students have the best ideas because no one's told them, no, you can't do that. And if they can't, you kind of guide them in the right direction. But there's something about that authentic, the sky is the limit, I can do anything, sort of mindset.
Mm-hmm. I don't
Yeah.
know
And
why
you
we
have to
lose
work
them.
deliberately. But
Mm-hmm.
it's because the
Yeah.
system, we're talking about the systems, to get the rewards, to pay the bills, to do all the things that we're supposed to do as
Yeah.
adults. The system tells you to perform. But
Yeah.
there's a whole mentality, and I only learned this maybe over the past 5 years, where you have to be confident enough to say, I own this, I own who I am, even if the system doesn't reward it.
Mm-hmm.
And that hurts you as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, think about it. Like, nature is, I want the blue ribbon, I want the
Right.
title, I want the best, I want all those things. But when you truly are confident in who you are, and you're like, I own me, I own who I am, even if no one else owns it, like that's a different level of satisfaction and happiness, even if you are working in a system.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to like your educational trajectory. So you got a
Okay.
master's degree in industrial engineering. Why industrial engineering?
Yeah. Excuse me. So my undergrad degree was in math, and I was trying to think what would be aligned with my interests. And I like fixing things, I like
Mm-hmm.
people. And industrial engineering was very it was process oriented, but there was a human factor to it. The productivity was there, the project management, just really caring about the system.
Mm-hmm.
Once again,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I loved, and I just wanted to pursue my passion. And so that was it. I just felt I could make things, systems, people better by going into industrial engineering and using mathematics in a way, and to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Did anybody at Spelman like encourage you to go to grad school? Because you could have just worked at NASA right after
Mm-hmm.
you were finished, since you had all that expertise.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories about going to grad school was when Dr. Faulkner. She was one of the first Black women to get a doctorate in mathematics in the U.S.
Wow.
She was from Tupelo, Mississippi, and her mentor, by the way, was the second Black woman to get a
Wow.
doctorate in the
It's a small
U.S.
circle.
Absolutely. And she pulled me in and said that they had 3 graduate fellowships, and she wanted to know if I wanted to go to grad school. And I
Nice.
said, um, "Dr. Faulkner, I am not like, this person's name. I'm not like that person's name. They have the 4.0s." And she said, "We Southern girls have to stick together. You've always underestimated yourself, and you can do this." So the fact that Dr. Faulkner told me that I could go to graduate school and that she had a fellowship from NASA if I wanted it, I was like, okay, I could do it. And that really
And
propelled
that's all
me,
it takes. Like, that's
That's
it.
all it takes.
it is. And I wrote a book, Demystifying the Engineering PhD, put a plug out there.
Yes.
Yes.
And this was my presidential award research in engineering education. And I asked people, like, what was their motivation for getting an engineering PhD? And you're right. There were so many people who said, someone in my class, my
Mm-hmm.
professor, who I took whatever statics with, said that I could do it. And I was like, oh, maybe I should get a PhD. And it is that simple where you see talent in the student and you're like, hey, I know you don't know that you can actually go to grad school, but you can be successful. That's simple. Having a conversation, calling somebody out.
Yes.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's literally all it takes. And it's amazing how, like, that small amount of dialogue leads to a whole changed life trajectory for someone.
Yes. That's the power of being a professor, the power of higher education. And unfortunately, there are so many people who turn people
I
off
was
that
just
way
about to
too.
say
And so,
it goes
Yeah.
both ways, right?
yeah,
Oh man,
yeah.
Yeah, it does.
I have
Definitely
emotions with
does.
that thought. So
When you said that, a literal face popped into my head, and I was like,
same,
"Ooh, child, we
same.
won't go there today."
Whew. Yeah.
So, go ahead, Jeremy.
I just, I have so many thoughts. I just don't even know where to begin. So you're talking about your presidential award and the research that you did. Um,
Right.
I know this is not related to this trajectory, but since we're talking about it, I want to know what else you found because
Mm-hmm.
I know there's more.
Oh, my favorite finding. I'll tell you my favorite because I do have favorites. And this is what has changed my life as well. It's funny how your own research can change you. Um, there's this framework called stewardship, and Chris Goldie at Stanford is a higher education researcher, and it's an older document. I mean, older book, and it's she pretty much asks, what does it mean to be a steward of a discipline? So, stewardship from a doctoral perspective. And she has these 3 elements: generation, which is creating research or just new knowledge, establishing new knowledge. Conservation is the second one, which is preserving the knowledge of the field. And the third is transformation. And if you read her book, she was very, very vague about transformation. And she said it's teaching in the broadest sense of the word. It's like, what does that mean? And so in my research, I had these 40 engineering PhD holders, my team and we just started asking people about what transformation looks like in engineering. And it is everything from email communication, it's mentoring people in industry, it is outreach with students, it is giving, classroom teaching, it's everything. And so my aha is, and why you talked about social media. I said, you know what? Transformation is social media. Transformation is when I tweet. Transformation is when I do a TikTok. Transformation is when I share my research and my experiences with people who will never enter my classroom. And that is what motivates me to also be so active on social media, because as other people would really try to say, it's a waste of
Mm-hmm.
time, you're just trying to get attention, it's not scholarly. But it is, because research says that when you look at underrepresented communities, we're more likely to be on social
Right.
media. That's where we use and learn and communicate.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give a 30-second, 1-minute TikTok that tells you about what it is to be a professor, so that that's representation. You're not going to find me in my
Right.
classroom. You're not. So that's the thing that forever changed my life. And if I could just get more scholars to understand that their dissemination is also getting their behinds out on YouTube and in podcasts and other spaces, that's going to multiply
Mm-hmm.
their impact.
Mm-hmm.
So
Plus
that's
100.
I had to ask that question.
Yes.
I'm glad I asked you.
No,
secret
that's
sauce.
good.
Y'all know this. So
Oh yeah. I mean, clearly we are disseminating YouTube, Insta, Twitter, podcast
We're not on the
avenues
tickety
that are
talk. I
available.
don't have the patience.
Yeah, we're not on TikTok yet.
but
Maybe one day if we get like a young intern or something. I don't think we have the
Maybe
capacity
when
to
Amara's old
figure
enough.
out. Yes, Amara can be our intern and do the tickety talk for us.
But you know what? It also comes back to entrepreneurship. And I know that you all are entrepreneurs as well. And I feel that there's also that piece of academia. Like, if we really want to be independently wealthy, if we want to be free, then we need to also see how all these people. I'm going to go off for
Go
a minute. So
ahead,
I'm going to need
girl.
y'all
Go
to flow.
ahead.
Go ahead.
I've seen people on Instagram, right? So let's talk about PhDs. Like, it's us, and we have our boxes. We're like, let me pay, $5,000 for a paper to publish a paper, versus these people on IG who are coaches, and they have like these $1 million coaching
Mm-hmm.
Oh
businesses,
my
and we
gosh,
are
I
so
can't.
like, well, I can't. Nobody's gonna learn from me. Nobody's gonna do whatever, baby. People don't have these degrees. They slap on a
Right.
wig and some makeup.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, you can come to my course for $255
Mm-hmm.
for an hour, and they get
Money.
buku money.
Yeah.
Y'all, what are we doing? So can we even talk
Yeah.
about, it's the mentality of how higher ed has put us in a box, and it's like, oh, your value is
Mm-hmm.
this, but there are
Mm.
people who didn't get the same training. You're talking about trajectories, and they're like, baby, I can make $30 million a year just going on Instagram and talking and
Yeah.
doing this. I don't have to overthink it. So
Right. And
there's
think about
something.
like Carrie Ann Rockmore. She's like, okay, I got tenure, and guess what? I'm going to show other people how to get where I am, and that's now going to be my job. Now I'm going to have this 7-figure company. Oh, guess what? I don't work at the university anymore. I am now retired.
Yeah.
So I think she's like the perfect example of stepping out of that box and like looking at your skill set, not in terms of how the university defines you, but how you define yourself and what value you can add for others.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's also this mindset that if you do that, you're a failure. Academia
Mm.
makes you think
Mm-hmm.
that
Yes,
if
they
you
do.
pay, if you're not a full professor, if you don't just wait it
Yeah.
out, then you did not succeed. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to really tell people that narrative is something that you really have to push against, because
Yes.
oof, it's a lot.
And one thing I also saw, I feel like it starts at the masters, because I was talking to a student and they were like, "Yeah, I didn't do my PhD. I mastered out." I'm like, "What does that mean?" Like, "Oh, I just got a master's." I'm like, "Do you realize just got a master's? Like we're basically taught to devalue ourselves unless we got to the PhD. Then you get the PhD. Oh, I stopped at assistant. Like there's always this next thing where it makes you feel like you're less than for not getting the next thing. So, yeah, we have
Absolutely.
to
It's very
And
hierarchical.
that's the
definitely.
social media part too. You have to be careful not to buy into that, because it's the same mentality of, oh, you have a podcast. Oh, you're choosing to do IG, or you're doing reels, or you're whatever. That's not a paper. You're less
Yeah.
than. And
Right.
Well, they don't know how
Even
but
to
when
it's
it
just
comes to like
quantify it.
evaluation. Yeah,
They
absolutely.
want.
It doesn't fit into the H index.
it does not. It does not. The podcast does not have an H index, but like I have a really nice narrative in my tenure packet that's basically
Mhm.
like, I'm a black woman who is uniquely positioned to affect people in this way. This is why I do what I do. And the end.
The
Go kick
end.
rocks. Like I'm gonna affect people the way that my white colleagues cannot. So why would I just say, oh no, I need to check the same boxes they're checking? No, they can't affect people the same way that I can because of my lived experiences and what I've been through. So yeah, academia definitely does not know how to, make it, like you said, make it an H index for all the other pieces that we
And
do.
I will say, I
Absolutely.
think some places are trying to figure out how they do a better job at that. Right? Like they're at least
Yeah.
engaging in conversations. And I think if you're in a place where they're not, I would be very wary of that, because
Yeah.
ultimately, like, if we don't evolve, higher education is going to go away. right? Like,
Yeah.
why do I need to pay
Because
all
it's
this
looking
money
real
for brick
pyramid
and
scheme
mortar?
right
Yeah,
now.
it is. It is, right? Like,
It's looking real pyramid scheme.
especially in computing, right? Like, I can go and
Yeah.
do this boot camp and get a six-figure job tomorrow,
Get these
right?
certifications, pivot.
So what can y'all tell me? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one other thing that also is really interesting, and I think about it like as a distinguished professor of engineering, as someone who is in the rooms now when there are no other women of color, I just think if I don't hold on, there's not someone right behind me who's going to come into this room. Like there's also that pressure that I think you feel as you also ascend, because you could see how conversations go wrong. If you were not there, you like,
Yes.
what? I had to do this because when I hired this person wouldn't have gotten promoted. And I just feel like there's so much heaviness also. And that's the thing that also kind of keeps me there, because you get to that space and you see how easy it is to go back to the oppressive space if you're not the
Mm-hmm.
one who speaks up and shows up and pushes. So
So
that's a different conversation.
okay, but
Yes.
you have a PhD in leadership and policy studies. So I think like you're also uniquely positioned in terms of what you've learned academically to see the
Mm-hmm.
structure, to really understand policy and leadership and all of that, and like how to affect change. And I feel like people, especially on social media, don't understand, you know, you're not just saying stuff on the internet like some of these other quote unquote influencers. Like this is your work.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. It is. The observations, the systems, and like you said, the policy. People like
Mm-hmm.
really putting ideas out there to say this is what needs to happen. And I'll even give you another example. Last night, maybe around this time, there was a lot of mess blowing up, email and on the internet, because my university's president was poised to resign. So media outlets were like, she's about to resign. Um, there was a student. How did I find out? Students in a class found the articles that said that our president was about to resign. They started asking the professors, and then the professors started looking, and then we started being like, "What's going on?" And by
Right.
7:30, the president sent an email across the university saying that she was resigning. And I got on social and I started thinking about this. You know what? You can play the game, you could be extremely safe, but it does not protect you.
Mm.
Mm.
If the board of trustees, if the alums don't like you, it does not matter if you code switch, it does not matter if you assimilate.
Mm-hmm.
It's just time for you to go. And that is the game that higher education plays. And that's why I tell people, make sure you have your own stuff. Make sure that you have something that puts you in a space where you are able to have your livelihood, you're able to maintain the purpose and the vision that you have for your life. And I also, like, my aha prophetic thing that I will say, and I've always said this, I used to want to be a university president, and I wrote this yesterday. At 19, I met Dr. Janetta B. Cole. I don't know if you know who she is,
Mm-hmm.
but amazing, amazing woman who has been a scholar multiple times over, just has worked broadly in the African American community. And, I'm like, that's my goal. But a couple of years ago, again, I said, that's too small.
Mm.
Because when you are a university president, when you're a provost, when you're an administrator, you are bound to that institution and to the rules of that institution. And if
Mm-hmm.
you want to say, oh, I'm going to transform, I'm going to dismantle, that's not your call.
Mm-hmm.
If the mission, the vision, and the people don't want to do what is in you to do, then you're either going to have to conform or you're going to have to get out of that system. Or you're going to have to just, do your own thing and not be an administrator, because you have to play, you have to pay to play. Is that it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that is, you give a bit of your professional soul to
Yeah.
an organization when you are in
Mm-hmm.
leadership. You
You
always do.
have
Especially at
to.
these state schools.
You do. You do. You're not taking down anything. I don't care how bold you think you are.
Nope.
No, that's not gonna
If the
happen.
governor tell you to stop, or the trustees, or whoever,
Whoever.
if you're not, yeah,
Yeah, you can't be the rebel because you're gonna rebel your behind right out. And
correct.
I just say the vision is that we have to get above the institutions. That's why I talk about social media, because the ideas and the people, we have to talk outside of our faculty
Mm-hmm.
meetings. We have to
Mm-hmm.
talk outside of the physical spaces where we are, because the revolution, the protests, all those things, the movements are happening at a higher level. They're happening
Mm-hmm.
behind the scenes. They're happening in the DMs. They're doing, they're different. That is the counter narrative, so to speak, of a system that was not built for us.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to like put the secret sauce out there, but for anyone who thinks, oh, I'm going to play the game and it's going to work for me and then I'll be able to change. Like we talked about this. Oh, I'll get tenure and I'll change. I'll be a full professor and I'll change. No, baby, the system knows you as that person. And
Mm-hmm.
if you change, that that's weird. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, kind of, but your credibility is now connected to
Who
how
you
you've
were.
always been.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And your identity is that. So there's a lot. And I just feel
Yeah.
there are just the next generation of scholars, like people young, I'm saying young, you're young, I'm young,
Mm-hmm.
but the scholars like you and a lot of other people I see who are out on social who are just being so authentic, they're going to have to operate in a model that is very different from what we are used to seeing
Yeah.
to
And
be
I feel like
successful.
in the model, I feel like it's changing as society's changing. Like, as Jeremy was saying, like they're starting to be more talk of, okay, let's count service, let's count these other things in people's narratives. So I feel like, yeah, the university is definitely a slow moving ship, but like you said, you're going to look weird initially. There's going to be these growing pains, but to fully transform, like you're going to buck the system a few times, and it's
I'm
I
like,
guess it's part of the
I
process.
think of myself as like new Monica. I had to say that because I just thought about it. I could hear the little,
New
yeah.
Monica.
Right? Like, I don't think that I am someone who likes to like shake up and dismantle systems, but I do like to speak truth. And so, like, when
Yeah.
I'm in meetings, I tell people exactly what I'm thinking because I think it's
Yeah.
important that they have a voice of someone who, like, I'm new here. And if I'm new and I'm uncomfortable, think of all the people who've been here and how uncomfortable they must be, right? When we're doing things
Yeah.
to bring in people who think differently, you know, we have different ideas of how the world is, like all these millennial faculty members that they're hiring, right? Like
Yeah.
millennials, as people tend to tell us, we're a hot mess. Like we got a lot of different thoughts about the world and we're going to share
Yeah.
them. And we're not often allowed to be at the table, but because I've been at my institution forever, all the people who
Mhm.
are kind of moving towards the top, they know who I am. And so
Mhm.
they value my honesty and my truth. I wish that more people had that in other places because I do feel like they don't, right? Like I can't go and
Exactly.
talk to my dean and tell them how I really feel, right? I'm not going to tell
Yeah.
them
Or,
this is
but you
what happened.
can.
Listen, yeah. So we
But you can.
we have like a real community where it's just like it wasn't us, right? Like we didn't hire each other. We were all hired and then we found each other. And
Yeah.
we're really strategic about decisions that we make together and like the things that we'll push for and ask for. But you have to have like people like you who have some power behind what they say to move the needle,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's hard when everyone tells you like you can't say that, don't say X, Y, and Z. You're constantly encouraged to like quiet yourself
Yeah.
for someone else's comfort, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it breaks your spirit a little bit. Like that's the thing that I've realized over time that if you're not careful, so much of that will change
Mm-hmm.
you as a human. And that's really unfortunate. And I think as part of the work that I do, I want people to be aware of who they are before they enter these environments because I've seen relationships break up as a result of higher ed. I've seen people just change because they just weren't grounded in who they were. So that's one part. I do think that it is important for us to I don't know, what was I going to say? Like one piece of advice I would say is that as long as you do your work, you also can be outspoken. Like you're there to be a faculty member, but the more successful you are, like remember, I had the career award, I had the PKs, I proved that I could do my work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also opens doors for you too. And so being a really good scholar, paying attention to your work, is a form of activism as well. It gets you the insurance that you need to be able to speak up, to say, you know what, yeah, I may clown around a little bit, but I know my stuff. I can give y'all
Right.
15 sentences. Like, let me flip that script, that switch on real quick and
Yes.
show you that I'm a scholar, and then I'm gonna come back over here and do something else. But always
Yeah.
you have to maintain that. And that's what I want young people to know because I teach my students and my students are ready to be activists from day one. And you've been there for 2 weeks. And I'm like, sweetheart, learn some stuff. You got to
Yeah.
read. You gotta do literature. You got to write. You have to really.
Because you don't know what you activating about yet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So,
Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
That is so true. Like when you said that, that reminded me of like I was on a committee at the college level with there's all these associate deans and chairs and all these folks, and this is me pre-tenure on this thing, and we're talking about I don't want to give details because people could be able to associate who said what, but we're talking about a solution to a problem. Everybody's going on and on about the dumbest solution. I was like, I'm sorry, y'all. We have to stop. This does not make sense. And I just went down the list of this is what the research says. This is da 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 da. There was silence. And then slowly someone goes, you know what? That's right. You know what? You are correct. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, but we've been going on for about 25 minutes about the dumbest possible solution. And all of y'all are at a higher pay grade than me. We are in trouble.
Right.
We are in trouble if y'all think this is correct. But yeah, it's about like I guess, like you said, like knowing the research, knowing your stuff, and being able to voice it from that perspective, and that people knowing you as a scholar and knowing your stuff, because then people listen, and we did not march down that terribly incorrect.
Listen, that
alley.
happened to me a few days, like not a few days, like a month ago, and I was like, okay, we're gonna submit this proposal, and you're proposing to do something that's like the literature that just came out that was like all over everywhere
Mm-hmm.
tells us do not do this, and you literally had this language, like delete
And you
that,
want to do it? What we do?
cite this, please don't.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like it's enraging sometimes to see like, oh, we're gonna change everything, we're gonna make it better, and it's like, but what you're proposing to do is worse. Like it's bad.
Right.
Right. And I feel like there's going to be some term, if there isn't one already, and it's like the COVID response term or something, because, people change real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's like, oh, we can't, we can't do online learning. But you know what? When y'all about to lose some dollars, all of a sudden, everybody learned how to use those computers and Zoom.
Sure did. Sure did. I know the
Like, what?
disability community was like, oh, everybody was saying you couldn't have conferences accessible, but guess what y'all learned how to do during COVID?
Yes,
For
I
the
know.
money.
And I feel this is another like soapbox in a way, but like you look at racial equity, you look at what was happening around the same time, people do what they want to do. That's what my mom used to say.
Mm-hmm.
We do what we want to do. Y'all wanted to do COVID, like y'all wanted not COVID, but y'all wanted to
Yeah.
respond.
Yeah.
Wanted to be online. You wanted people to be safe. You wanted to have policies and practices and remote work, and you
Mm-hmm.
just shifted everything. But y'all still haven't worked on your diversity
Ooh.
plans. You still aren't doing some stuff. So guess what? That's your choice.
Hello.
I'm gonna just
So we don't talk about that one enough.
doodle over here.
Them diversity plans have dust on them, and I was invited to do a talk at your rival university,
Oh man.
and I had to read to them their diversity plan. I was like, y'all are integrating people into a burning building. Like, why is everything focused on outreach? We need to just quench the fire in the building, and then we can worry about getting other people in here. But them diversity plans, I think people just wrote them to say they had them. But we have a different.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You know, but people got scared in 2020. Like somebody's about to come and burn something down. Like there was this real fear, and I just think that we're getting comfortable again. You know, people like, let's go back to normal, but no, there is no back to normal. And you know, it gets to another topic where, you know, there are a lot of people who benefited from that. You know, controversial topic. You know, people who got hired, a lot of resources went out there, and we have to also evaluate what people have done in our own communities, the ones who access. Now that you're in the seat, are you doing the work?
Right. Are you informed? Are you bringing in other people who are scholars of color who can speak to these things? Or are you just a puppet? Are you a figurehead in this position?
Absolutely. And
we need a diversity plan. We need a DEI audit on some of these positions. But
that's a whole conversation for another podcast. We trying to figure out Monica's life. So
yes,
you like worked as an engineer, correct?
At NASA a little bit, yes.
So what made you decide academia, that's it for me?
Let's see, can I say this out loud?
You sure can.
I don't know, it was like my being an intern. It was just not. It just wasn't it for me. I liked research, I liked new research problems, and I liked the research problems that connected to engineering education. Like whenever I have an issue that always drives me, whether it's in my business or if it's in the area that I want to study, and I just feel that the questions I had about equity connected back to higher education, particularly how I was at Spelman, and I just felt the love, the support, the nurturing. But when I went to a PWI, I was like, what's happening over here? Like, what's going on? And why are women struggling? And, you know, what's going on with the professors? And why don't I see anyone who looks like me anymore? And I just started having so many questions, and I wanted to answer those questions. I wanted to make sure that the experiences were better for people. And I feel like that was the industrial engineering part of me, you know, the solutions oriented person. So I combined, I think my natural, like my inquisitive nature with technology and with engineering for engineering education. It just made sense to me.
How did you even know that was a thing? Because that's what I thought. Because I mean, it's new here, right? Like, I'm in a department that I was told would never exist.
Yeah.
And she's a whole assistant professor in that non-existent department.
Yeah, I love it. So yeah, like it was around 2004 I interviewed, and Purdue had the first Department of Engineering Education. And I remembered when I interviewed, there was a guy, Phil Wonkat, who introduced me, and he said, it's as if I had a crystal ball. And I always remembered that. He said, I had a crystal ball because my preparation uniquely prepared me for that position that did not exist. And it's because when I was in higher ed, everything that I did was connected to engineering education because I just knew that's what I was interested in. And so I pursued my passion and my interest. And I think that has helped me to always be at the forefront of anything. Like even with my business, stop playing diversity. You know, that's another example where I just got so fed up with higher education, having all these women of color programs and grants, but then the women of color have the same problems. I'm like, what? Like, how are you giving millions of dollars to organizations that do nothing to help? That, you know, I don't understand what they're doing. So I said,
we got the same issues.
Yes, I'm gonna get my happy behind here. Trademark with one of my Spelman sisters is a patent attorney, so she helped me with the whole like trademarking for Stop Playing Diversity. And I said I'm just gonna start with, and I think Kyla, I talked to you about merch and all this other stuff. I'm like, do this because for my trademark, I had to have my my proof, my services, my goods, have that. And I was like, well, I have to get some stuff out there. But I just started listening to people on social media. I started putting stuff out. I started doing my own like digital guides. I started doing webinars because I said, this is what I wish I would have had. This is the way I think that that diversity should be done because it's what I need. So I just started thinking about that.
So
I started
nobody
talking.
gave you permission to do it?
Kyla.
Oh, nope. I said, I'm going to take it. And I'm sure it was very aggressive to people in my environment to be like, is she just angry? And, one of my sayings was, I'm not an angry Black woman. I'm a Black woman whose questions make people angry. And that's it. I'm just inquisitive.
You need to put that on a shirt.
Right, because there's a lot of us.
That one was and it's true. Like, I just keep asking questions. And one of my friends talked about how she doesn't get the pushback. So she's a Black woman as well. But she said, it's because I don't push against the system. I don't ask the question. I don't question the system, but I do. And if you look at my tweets, if you look at what's up, I'm always going to put something out there to be like, you know what? The system needs to do better. I'm just coming for you because I can. Every day when I wake up, I'm coming for you, system. And I just will not back down because there is something that needs to be done and someone somewhere needs to see it. And so I'm just not that one who's like, oh, I got my 40 acres and a mule. I'm okay.
Right,
I'm going to let people do what they do. No, until everybody is free, I'm coming for you every day. Okay. Mad today, nobody didn't. I just feel like telling you somebody somewhere needs this. So let's do it.
So we talked about the system because as a grad student, you probably didn't see much of, the inner workings of the system. So like, what did you learn about academia, like as a faculty member and this whole system that you became a part of unknowingly?
She said that's a whole podcast episode.
Yes, because you know what? Faculty, different than administrator too. So what did I learn? Man, this is a good question because it's different everywhere, in every level. So
say the first transition from from grad student to faculty, trying to get tenure.
Yeah. What did I learn? I learned that you had to conform. Like you were expected. You didn't have to. You were expected to conform. Particularly in STEM, particularly I think in engineering, there's a way that things have always been done. And when you come in as a first or an only, people don't have a frame of reference. They can't see anything other than it's like you're almost like the brown person who just does everything that everyone else does. And the nuances cause friction. And it's just little things like every day. And I learned that I thought I was there to like teach my students, but I was teaching staff. I was teaching like the entire department and the university about how to engage, and I was not prepared to do that. Like I didn't expect that mantle to be on me, and I think that many people are not. And so at the time, I trademarked prepared to be a pioneer because one of my sayings was I was prepared to be a professor. I was not prepared to be a pioneer. That is not what I was there to do. All the grant writing, like you talked about, Carrie Ann Rockamore. Yeah, like grant writing, advise students, write papers. That is what grad students are taught to do. Future faculty, that is it. But there's a whole like intersectionality piece that was missing, and it was just the isms that caused the mental angst and all the things that kept me from being really happy and effective. Well, I was effective, but happy. I wasn't always happy. I would say the transition to an administrator was hard. It was harder because I was young. I was 39 years old when I became a department chair. I
Wow.
became a
You
school
see why
professor when
you
I was
go,
39 years old.
child. See what I'm saying?
You better do it.
Yeah, so in 10 years, after getting my PhD, I'd gone from assistant to associate to full professor and department chair. So 10
A
years.
And you
boss.
switched
Before,
A
universities
boss.
too.
yes, yes, I did that. Oh, thank you. And I mean, now I'm a distinguished professor. So I became a distinguished professor when I was like 45. And so that's like, the next level.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my point is there are several points, but I'll kind of come back with the lesser point right now. And that I feel like I peaked. I peaked really early, and I do acknowledge that. And I still have, so many years left, but I have to be careful not to be bored. And that may sound weird too.
No.
Like, graduate,
But as
you know, I,
someone who sees you on this continual upward trajectory, I don't see how you peaked early or just peaked in the way that academia expected you to
Yes.
and not your own personal brand.
Just like the academic
yes,
side.
I did the academic path. It's like check,
Mm.
check, 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 tenure,
Oh,
did.
yeah, you did a lot of stuff young.
Absolutely.
That
So,
means you're an achiever.
Yes.
yeah, but it's like, what do I say? And this almost sounds like academic blasphemy. Once you write so many grants, you know how to do it. You graduate 10 PhD students, you know it. You start a department that didn't exist. I mean, it's that part. You
Right.
know what I mean?
A whole
Like
degree program, nothing big, y'all.
such it was there was no blueprint, and it was just so challenging
Mm-hmm.
that I don't know if in academia there is anything that will be as challenging to me or for me, because it was
Mm.
just so, like, how many people start something from scratch? Like, you literally don't have policies, and you have to look and you have to create it. You have to
We're in
hire
it now.
tenure track
Felt.
for the first time, but it is a
Yes.
moment, an absolute moment. And dare I connect it to like being president of the United States. Like, you do it and you're like, it's hard, and then afterward you're like, yeah, like, Barack, I'm gonna start a media company, or I'm gonna do something, because you're at that moment where it's like all your leadership coming into one space that is so unique, really leading at the beginning of the pandemic. um you see these once in a lifetime things, and you
Mm-hmm.
learn, and it's like, I can't just go back to who I was,
Mm-hmm.
because I am so different, and I've learned so much, and I have so much more to give. And that's where I'm also really trying to figure out what my next is going to be. And I don't know if I said this on the recording or if I said it just before, but I do get opportunities to be a dean. I
Mm-hmm.
get opportunities to apply for provost positions and presidents, but they don't feel right to me, because um, I expect more. I've changed, and I can't put the old me into these positions, because the positions have not evolved enough given where I am in my life. I will, these are $300,000, $400,000 jobs, but the money doesn't move me, because if the system and the environment is not progressive, no amount of money will satisfy me.
Yeah,
And I
because
know
you wake up hating your job. You're like, why am I here? What am I doing?
that's it. That's it.
We're
And I think that's just an aha moment.
we're team protect your peace on this podcast. So
Yes, we
we
are.
touch and agree. And
Oh, thank you.
I would not put myself in a situation where, like, at this point I think I'm done. Like, we're not going places where I feel uncomfortable, where I have to work with people I don't want to work with. Like, I
Right.
I don't have to do that.
For the sake of what?
Yeah,
For
like,
why?
I will leave. I will.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's power. That's power. And I think, so often we have not realized that we have that power, and we don't we
Mm-hmm.
don't operate in it. And I think when people realize they have choices, even
Right.
when they think they don't have choices, that's when you really are powerful. When you
Mm-hmm.
don't need a title, but you realize you're a leader. And that's another aha. So you want to know, like, Kyla, you're asking me this. What is my aha? It was contentious. Oh my gosh, my time was contentious as a department chair, and I was not reappointed as department chair. I really pushed hard against the system, and I think the system was not going to change. And I just I was like, it has to change for my peace and for whatever. And we just didn't see eye to eye. But um, I had to come to grips with the fact that if I never had another title, I was still a leader. And if I never got the money that connected to the title, I'm still a leader. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole different mindset for people who are high achievers, for people who are used to that external validation, because higher education is all about that validation.
Yes.
And, you talked a little bit about Twitter, and I feel that's interesting because it also is a form of leadership that I sometimes forget.
Mm-hmm.
And to know that
Absolutely.
to tweet something, and like one of the aha moments is that a woman connected to me on LinkedIn, and she told me she'd been following me. She said she quit her job after 10 years because I
Wow.
talked about um, deserving better. And to have someone just say, because of your words, I quit. And the thing that always connects with me is that there was a woman, a grad student, who connected to me. And she said that she was going through a hard time and she had thought about taking her life, but my words kept her moving. And
Wow.
it always gets me
Wow.
because it's just that part where I'm having to change my thinking and realize that it is a form of
Mm-hmm.
ministry. And I never thought that I would be in this space. This was not the path that I thought. I was going to be the university president. I was going to be the one who had the formal position. But I feel that I am being led into these spaces where I can write something and someone feels that they have hope.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
That's
It makes me
beautiful.
teary
That's
because
huge.
I don't
You
know.
have
Like, how do you,
you
I
have
don't know. It's
power, you have influence, and I
huh.
mean, I'll
And a
tell a quick
platform.
story. So before we end, I feel like this is kind of really important because we've met multiple times, right? Like throughout my trajectory. And I remember, after my fangirl moment in the conference, I was invited to Ohio State
Mm,
to be a part of a study. And
yeah.
I remember like coming into this conference room space and like sitting down, and you came in, you sat down in the chair next to me, and you said, "Why don't I know you?" And I was
It
like,
was like better.
I don't know. And then you said, "Tell me about you." And we started
Mm,
talking, and you didn't want me to leave. So I guess like
mm.
you had a lunch break coming up, and you were like, "Can you go with me?" And we just
Oh, yeah.
talked.
Oh.
We talked
Yeah.
for
I remember.
like, so we interviewed and then we just talked.
Yes.
And for me, like someone who was I was in a place where like I'd had a very difficult experience in my PhD. And then I had the chance to talk to the Monica Cox, right? Like I called people. I called Lauren
Mm,
Thomas, and I was like,
mhm.
"Lauren, do you know Monica? Am I safe going here?" you know? And so when I
Real.
talked to you, I was like, this is it. This is like I'm meeting the person that I
Mm.
know that I can be one day. So following
Oh,
you on social
thank you.
media has been cool, but then like reconnecting with you again and again. So like we connected at Lattice, right? And we had
Mhm.
way too much fun on that little
Yes.
island, cutting up, being ridiculous together. Um, I remember meeting your son for the first time at a conference, and
Mhm.
um, I found out later that I was pregnant, right? So it's like all these
Oh.
things, just like things are happening that connect us.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it means a lot to like see you continue to do the work that I feel like you were called to do because it encourages
Thank
me
you.
to do the work that I'm called to do. So having a chance
Yeah.
to tell your story and let people know like where you come from with what you're saying is from a place of we should all be able to go to work and be
Mm.
ourselves. We should be able to
Yeah,
walk through life and be ourselves, and not in a way that's
absolutely.
like, if you're a terrible, awful, hateful person, like that's a very different
Don't be
conversation.
yourself. Be a
But
different person.
like, I shouldn't have to hide that, like, I like to put my hair in braids sometimes. And some
Yeah.
days, like, I'm just not going to do my fro. It's going to look a hot mess. But that's because of the day that I'm having. And, like, either way is respected. I might want to wear a
Yeah.
whole face of makeup tomorrow and some ridiculous
Yes.
shoes because I can. But the
Right.
next day, I might want to wear a t shirt and chill. Like, and that's okay. Right? Like, we
It
should be able
is. It is.
to be ourselves at work. And you are telling people that's okay.
It
I don't know
is.
why that's
And thank you.
problematic.
I know. You know what? I mean, so something that's coming to me too. I'm also, a person of faith. And I was never, it's funny. For a minute, I was like, am I going to be a pulpit minister? And I was like, no, I'm not going to be a pulpit minister. But there's so many ways that we do, minister to people. And I read this author, Dr. Miles Monroe, who's passed away, and he talked about like dying empty, and that has always stayed with me. He talks about how there's so much potential in the graveyard. They're the richest places on earth because people didn't they didn't compose songs, or they didn't write the books that they were supposed to write. And I feel that this is a moment for me, in that I always thought I would be like, just do my research. But the way that I have to move is like bringing that ministry to people who don't have hope, to people who don't know
Mm-hmm.
um, that they can be free, in the workplace. And so it's the mantle is heavy. I would say that there has been a lot, and I gave a presentation as I went through some legal things. I went through so much drama at the Ohio State University. Oops, the Ohio State University, which is really, like you said, where I am. I've gone through a lot, and to whom much is given, much is required. That is true, but I also tell people, I felt what it was like there's this scripture that talks about, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I've seen that, and what you see in my words is my coming out of that. You see what it's like when you have been in the pit, when you have been, in prison, when there were not people who had your back.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Right.
even when your supervisor abandoned you, when your colleagues were not courageous enough to speak up for you. I know what that's like. And I just promised that I would never be the person who would abandon people. And so I feel like that's why my message resonates, because you have to be courageous to do this work. If you say that you're going to be an activist, if you say that you're going to be a disruptor, that is just not a word. That is something that comes with
Mm-hmm.
scars and beatings and abandonment. But if you are true to that, people will be free. That's like the Moses moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess one of the last things I'll say, and I want to thank you for the things that you are saying, because I will admit I do have moments when, I help people and, they get theirs, but it still looks like I haven't gotten mine. And the thing that continues to come to me um, is that I don't do what I do so other people will struggle. I do it so they're free. And so I have to
Mm-hmm.
remember that too. When I see people who ascend, that is success.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always like, oh my gosh, Monica, you have to be this person with this money, with this title. No, like maybe that's what that person
Mm-hmm.
needs.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. There's something here for your listeners. Like, I just feel like you just have to dig in really deep to do this work, because the return does not always come in the way that you think it's going to come. And if you are validated only by those kinds of returns, then this may not be the work that you need to
Right.
do.
And it's so counter to academia, because everything's so subjective. It's about what your peers think, what your peers say, how they
Yeah,
evaluate you. But it's like, no, this is actually about how I feel about myself.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you for talking to us about all of the things. I mean, we didn't even mention all of the things, right? Like, you're a co-founder of Black in engineering, right? Like this
Right.
whole Black and X network. That's
Do you want to give a
you.
plug for
And
Black in Engineering real quick for folks that don't know what it is?
Yeah, you know what? Black in Engineering is a group of over 400 Black engineering professionals who are really passionate about social justice. So it emerged after the murder of George Floyd. And we have a call to action at blackinengineering.org. And we're really just trying to make sure that our voices are heard and we are a community that comes together so that we all make it to where we need to be whole and successful.
that was really good.
That's awesome.
It's like you just had it there, waiting to be
Yes.
said.
In my heart, it's in my spirit. That's
Yes.
it.
When it's authentic, it is there.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Thank
how do
you.
people find you on the internet? Because we talked about how you're on the internet, but we didn't say how to find you.
So I'm at Dr. Monica Cox, Dr. Monica Cox, um, on all social media platforms, and I'm on LinkedIn. You can email me info at drmonicacox.com. Go to my website as well. Um, what else? You can contact me at work, but just know I work at a public institution, so don't tell our business. So it's that stuff. But really, I mean, it's on social. DM me, at me, because I feel like that is where the action happens, and it is just where I really want to share this message that is bigger than academia, which is really funny.
Yes.
I didn't tell you about too much of my research papers. I mean, I told you about my book, but
We might
it's
have
this
to
other.
come back for another episode too to get into those because there's a lot of ground here to cover.
Absolutely. Women of color, what we've learned, just about wage disparities, what's happening, how we need to get organizations to do better. Yeah. There's a lot. There's so much, y'all.
That's why she's
There's a lot of ground.
distinguished.
She's distinguished.
Distinguished
Yeah.
professor.
Try to
Yes.
be. Not always,
We're
but
gonna
I
have to
try.
have you back because we need to get into some of this work you've been doing. Like we scratched the surface, but we need to definitely have you back so we can get even more depth there.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm so proud of you all. I'm giving you all a shout out too, because I love, lifting up my sisters. And I'm like, man, y'all are trailblazers. Just doing what you do with your podcast. Like, I know I have my little podcast. It's just me talking. Stop playing diversity, podcast, just talking it out because I didn't have anybody to talk to. So I was like, let me just talk to
Hey,
to
we'll
the
come
phone.
on and be guests. We'll come on and be guests.
I have to get my infrastructure right to have some guests, but I would definitely invite you to do that. But yeah, like you all are doing it. Like you all are bold. You're really connecting the community. You are scholars in your own right. I mean, just amazing. Just role
We're
Thank
models.
you.
trying.
We are
You are
trying. We're
trying. You are doing it. Y'all are right. I
Okay,
just
Kyla's doing, and I am in progress.
really look. I got tenure. I'm trying to figure out how to be an academic troublemaker. Like that is the next line on my resume, and I need to just figure out what venue of trouble I would like to make because it's a whole lot that needs to change, and we don't, in my opinion, we don't need to be in these spaces if we're not disrupting stuff. So, but I want to strategically disrupt things.
absolutely. And you have
Destabilize.
to learn the system. You have to learn the system so you can tear the system down.
Hello. People are like, oh, you complain so much about academia. Why are you there? I'm like, you can't disrupt from the outside. You got to be inside to disrupt. You can't hate from
Listen,
outside.
I'm a civil engineer. I understand structures. I'm gonna break some stuff down. That's how I feel.
Exactly.
I love that. And I think, my Spelman sister, Stacey Abrams, has a book, Leading from the Outside. And I think it's really interesting because she does talk about that. And I've always had this, mentality of like, yes, you can be an insider, you're in the structure, but I feel like you can also lead from the outside as well. Leadership is in both spaces. And so wherever you find yourself, really connect to your communities and do what you can so that you can make sure the environment's equitable for everyone.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yay! Thank you, Monica.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yes, this
Well,
has been great.
thank you for having me.